our age, we can always check our birth certificate. But can any reliable methods determine the age of an object without a historical record? Radiocarbon dating measures the ratio of radioactive carbon-14 to stable carbon-12 in an organic artifact like wood or bone. The method assumes how much carbon-14 was present when the tree or animal died and how fast carbon-14 decays in order to calculate how old something is. Because carbon-14 completely decays in thousands of years, it should only be useful to date objects no more than tens of thousands of years old. However, using this method, scientists determined that samples from U.S. coal beds conventionally dated at 40 to 329 million years had carbon ages of 48,000 to 50,000 years. Diamonds are said to be billions of years old, but they still have carbon-14 in them, and return to ages of about 55,000 carbon years. And supposedly millions of years old dinosaur bones and other fossils show dates in the tens of thousands of carbon years. Radioisotope and radiocarbon ages can clearly contradict one another, so how can we know which method to trust? Measuring isotopes is very accurate, but the assumptions needed to convert those measurements into ages can't be verified. After all, how can anyone today verify how much of each isotope was in a rock or fossil when it formed long ago, or that no isotopes entered or left? Carbon-14 and radioisotope dates rarely match an object's real calendar age. But because the Bible is like a birth certificate for the world, resolving Earth's age is a piece of cake.
Okay, who can recite that for me? Okay, I'm a chemist and it's hard enough. Okay, so anyways, I wanted to make a couple of announcements before we introduce the Front Range organizations, different people that are associated with those groups, so you kind of have an idea of what's happening within this area in the way of biblical creation, meetings, education, and so forth. So I don't think they've actually mentioned it, but and maybe you already knew it, but there is an ICR museum, okay? It's in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. I'm not sure it's in either one of those towns, but it's in the area. It's been there about 2.5 years, so it's quite new. If you're managed to make your way down there, again, it would be a good place to visit. Recently, they've started doing these ICR podcasts. And what they are basically is they take a topic and they have an interviewer and a scientist and they ask questions and they're really informative and they're only 20 minutes long in that ballpark. But you can really find out neat information about a particular topic and they're continuing to add. I think they just added their most recent just a few days ago. I think the number's up to 21 or something like that. So again, you go to their ICR.org website and you can obtain that information. And then, of course, these That's a Fact videos, that's something that's probably designed more for the younger people to follow because of the speed and everything. But again, those are available for purchase from their area. So I guess at this point, what I'd like to do is if we had representatives, and maybe you've already had a chance to meet everyone, but the Denver Society for Creation, which is really the host group for this, which Judy is leading, and she's in the back there, okay? They meet on the first Thursday of each month, but not in the summer. Is that correct? Not in the summer. Okay, so September through May, they have meetings. 7 o'clock, I believe, is the start time. Okay. And so, again, they kind of move around to various churches in the Missouri Lutheran churches in the Denver area. But are you mostly at one location? Mount Zion, okay, which is sort of in Denver proper, right? Okay, so again, if you're available on the first Thursday of the month, try and make it there during the school year. Think of it in that way. The Northeast Colorado Creation Group, which Paul Feltz leads. Is Paul in here? Okay, well, they're located in, oh, there he is. Okay, there's Paul right there. Paul is located in Fort Morgan. That's where they meet. So it's a bit out there, northwest, out 76. Yes, a great place to visit. Okay. All right. And Okay, and they meet on the second Thursday of the month. Okay, so if you want to take a drive out to Fort Morgan, you can, on a Thursday, second Thursday of the month, you can meet there. Then there is the Rocky Mountain Creation Fellowship, which meets on the second Friday of the month. So Thursday, Friday, same week. And that Fred Williams, would you stand, Fred? Fred's a vice president. Fred also has Real Science Radio. Okay, so he's the host of Real Science Radio. So again, what is the website for that? Real Science Radio. rsr.org. Okay, so you can again see the, okay, and so you'll see Fred, or hear Fred, I should say. Okay, and then Pikes Peak Creation Fellowship, that's me, Rich Cloud. We're down the Springs, and we meet on the second Saturday of the month. So sometimes we share speakers, Thursday, Friday, Saturday of the second week, and sometimes, depending on how the schedule goes, Judy's involved in that too. So it just really depends. But again, we have 4 groups in the Front Range to get additional education, fellowship over the subject of biblical creation. And we're all young Earth. We're all very, in line with ICR and all the other major CMI and AIG and so forth. Oh, and one last thing. I was just talking to Judy, and in case you're overwhelmed, which I heard a comment earlier that I'm kind of overwhelmed right now, this conference will be available online at the Denver Society for Creation website. Okay, and I'll link it to YouTube. But so you go to that website, and let me make sure it's Denver Society. Is it of or for? Denver Society of Creation.org. One word. Say it again. Denver Society of Creation.org. But give her a little bit of time. Okay, it's not her job. So give her 2-3 weeks to get that up. But again, if you miss something, you want to see it again, you'll be able to do that. Okay, so I think that's it for right now. I'm going to have Dr. Thomas come up. His topic is on why the world looks so young. And would you welcome him? Oh, before you do that, this is the book that he has put together with a few other scientists. He's the primary author. And I'm sure he's going to include a lot of information in the talk from this. And so if you wanted to pick up a copy, you can. Please come up, Dr. Thomas.
Well, congratulations, you've suffered till almost the end. Gold stars across the room, doing it the whole way through. This is a cool story. I just want to start off with a story. A friend of mine told me this is what happened to him, and I just want to tell it to you. He was raised in a secular house, never went to church, and he became a successful businessman, and he's driving to work one day, and he sees a billboard on church, and it says, geologist coming to speak. And he thought to himself, why would a geologist speak at a church? That's just so weird. I guess I want to go see So that's the first time he ever stepped foot in a church, was to see a geologist speak. And it happened to be an ICR scientist speaking on Mount St. Helens. And in 1 hour, this friend of mine learned that you can form that sediments get deposited in layers even though they're flowing at freeway speeds. He learned that those sediments can harden into rock in just months. And he learned that in just a few minutes, with enough water, you can carve through those and create canyons. So you don't need lots of time to make layers, rocks, or canyons. It's the 3 of the most obvious features of the Earth's surface. And so right there, during that hour, it dawned on him that if all you need is enough water, you don't need all that time. And if Noah's flood explains the rocks, the layers, the canyons, then that leaves no time for evolution. But he believed in evolution because it's all he had ever heard. And so he bought all the books at the book table at the back. And he went and read those. And because he became convinced of creation, he went back to the Bible, and he came to Christ through reading the scriptures. Isn't that cool? That's just cool. So praise the Lord for that. So wouldn't it be great if we had more Christians out there willing and able to lay out some of this basic evidence that supports the history that's in Genesis, creation and the flood, the two events that 2 Peter 3 says scoffers will come and scoff at, the creation and the flood. 2 Peter 3, look it up. That's the world we live in today, the world of scoffers. So I believe it helps us to get equipped. And so that's what this last presentation is all about. If we can move the idea that the world is only thousands of years old from the realm of science deniers and quack science to the realm of this is actually rational. There's actually evidence to support this view. Then I think we can progress a conversation in a good direction. And by the way, even as Christians ourselves, how many Christians have I met who feel threatened and intimidated by the fact that science has proven the universe and the earth are billions of years old, so that when they turn to their own book and look at the passages that indicate recent creation, they have to doubt those passages. So we have a world of Christians who are doubting their own book. And so I want to free us up from that and let you know that, yes, there's good science to support the idea that the world is actually, it really does look young. And it looks young in at least the 4 realms that I'm going to go over today. So first realm, this is important science that supports recent creations, what this is all about. First realm is human body, mankind. So we're going to go from us to the world and then to the stars. Ready? Okay. Okay. So, 5 of you were here last night. Teeing it up. So world population is what it is, but why is it that we've only had recently this big population growth according to the exponential growth rate? Here's the formula that we can use. The population today should be equal to the starting population raised to the base of natural logarithms, times the base of natural logarithms raised to the power of rate times time. And so we get our rate from historical census records. So you type it in your calculator as 0.004, something like 4%. And so anyway, 0.4%. Well, if you start with biblical starting points, how many people came off the ark according to Peter? And according to Genesis, 8 people. So Noah, Mrs. Noah, Shem, Ham, Japheth, Mrs. Shem, Mrs. Ham, Mrs. Japheth. Count them up. It equals 8, at least in the math that I was taught back in the 70s. And you use the historical growth rate, and you type in for 4,500 years the time since the flood, you're going to get about 6.5 billion people right when you should have them. So we have today's population numbers matching what we would predict based on the Bible's basic information and standard population growth rates and formulas. So that's pretty cool. Now, in the evolutionary view, we have to, in order to support the idea that there were vast eons beforehand, and that somehow humans didn't have this population explosion until now, they have to invent a history that goes from here, and it just goes this way, off the screen, way off the screen, into the next room, all the way to the donuts. Okay, so that's how long, to put it in scale. So the question would be, why is it that we've only recently had this population growth? And if we've been around as a population of only 1,000 people, why didn't we just go extinct by some, impact or accident or disease? And how did we have a maintenance of the exact same population rate for so long? And then where are all these skeletons from all those eons of all those supposed ancestors? So those are some questions we can ask our friends and let them think a new way about how even population growth, the world's population, looks recent. So I've boiled these down to some questions that we can ask our friends. And so I've got, half a dozen, maybe 10 questions. Here's one of them. If mankind is millions of years old, then why does population growth show mere thousands? Next, we have a mutation issue. Mutations occur, they happen. They're copying errors in our DNA. And so what this teaches us is that we're suffering from a buildup of mutations, and it happens every generation. So scientists have measured, by the way, this is just a snapshot of our old website. Dire need of update is this slide. But we do have tens of thousands of articles on it. Anyway, one of those articles I wrote years ago based on scientists who measured, and these are secular mainstream scientists, so they have no agenda but to show that the Bible's wrong, you know. But unfortunately, they're showing the opposite because, kids, you have 100 more mutations than mom and dad. Mom and dad, you got 100 more mutations than your mom and dad. We're getting worse. So intelligence is finally on the decrease. So there's articles about that. And diseases are on the increase, and mutations are on the increase. So this mutation clock is ticking, and so there's a secular scientist, I'll skip this slide here. If there's a secular scientist named Kondrashov, and he asks in his paper, why have we not gone extinct 20 times over? In other words, if we've been around for hundreds of thousands of years, accumulating mutations at the current rate that we're measuring, then we should have mutated ourselves into extinction. We should have had so many diseases. You know, it's kind of like what happens to some of these dog breeds, like the St. Bernard. You've heard of the St. Bernard? Some of the St. Bernards, they just can't have kids anymore because it's just stillbirths, and poor St. Bernards. So there's a program going on where they're taking St. Bernards and breeding them back into the wolf, the original dog kind. Looked like a wolf, we think. And so they're rebuilding the genetic structure of St. Bernards, and they're trying to tease back out those same features and make newer, better, or at least less worse St. Bernards to try to stave off the relentless mutation clock. We are not, as a gentleman told me, well, he wasn't very gentle. A grumpy man told me 2 nights ago, he said, we're mutating, and it's natural selection is compiling all the best mutations, and we're always on the way up. It's this onward and upward philosophy, which contradicts what? Science, the measured mutation rates, 100 new every generation. So there's a question you can ask. Well, recent creation of man fits, and there's a lot more evidence that we could cite, and some of it is in that book that I wrote most of, Why the World Looks So Young. It's the cute little green one. I'll show it to you in a minute. What about Earth? So here's the second realm. So let's equip ourselves with questions we can ask our friends and neighbors about, why does this look that old? Let's say your friend doesn't care about the human body, which is kind of weird, but loves rocks, also weird. And you're like, hey, I can talk about rocks. I got some questions about these rocks. So here I am at a road cut exposed in North Dallas, FM 1382 actually. And so what did they do? They had to cut through this road, and they exposed the earth beneath in order to build this road. Well, the rock layer is limestone that my hand is on, and my feet are on bits that have fallen down since the construction. And what do I find in those bits? Fossils. Fossils of clams. Clam fossils are all over the place. They're in the top rocks, the middle rocks, the bottom rocks. Clams. And so there's fossils there. In today's oceans, are clams, generally speaking, turning into fossils that end up in limestone layers? You don't know? Are clams turning into limestone on the bottom of the ocean? You guys are like, okay, some of you are now coming out with it. Yeah, if you want to join me, just do this. No, it's a mud, and the mud is constantly being churned by worms and clams. But they're not getting fossilized. But it happens nowhere today, but it happened everywhere in the past, in the yesterday. So something different back then must have deposited all these rock layers, all these clams in them. Anyways, it takes rapid covering, and so So that's what we have, rapid covering, and you have to pile these clams into a layer of mud and spread it out all across hundreds of square miles, like this rock layer is here. What am I saying? What I'm saying is that when I took geology courses in college, my professor said, this rock layer, this limestone, and he took us to outcrops, and we put our hands on the rocks, and he gave us the doctrines that we needed to learn, the evolutionary doctrines that we had to memorize and regurgitate on tests so we could make our A's. And it said, the slow settling of silt accumulated on the ancient seafloor, so that this 20-inch thickness accumulated over hundreds of thousands of years. That's the story I had to memorize and spit out on a test. Then I started looking at the fossils and realized fossils wouldn't form that way. And so you have to have rapid moving water, so this is rapid formation. So then I took another geology course where the prof realized that and answered that. He said, we think this layer now, we used to think it was a slow settling of silt accumulating on the bottom of the seafloor. Now we think it was a flood. But now the layer above it, you see the layer above me? The layer above it happened millions of years later, or hundreds of thousands of years later. So now we've got the time gap. So this rock layer happened very fast. This rock layer above it happened very fast also, but in between, on that flat contact, that's where you insert the millions of years. So that's what we do today. If one layer took thousands of years to form, why does it have fossils? It's a good question to ask, because fossils don't form today. And then if those millions of years or hundreds of thousands of years elapsed in between the deposition of the layers, then where are the ruts that it should have accumulated through eons of erosion? Instead of ruts, we have flat surface, like there was no erosion at all. It's perfectly flat, and then another layer was plopped right on top of it in rapid succession, is what we see, evidence for the flood. In other words, the whole stack was deposited all at once. If millions of years occurred between the layer, then where's the erosion ruts? We can ask our friends these honest questions. Let them answer it. They may have an answer, and that's okay. But let's get the conversation started by plopping in these questions. And honestly, if someone didn't ask me questions like this, I would still believe that I came from fish to this moment. But it was a friend of mine who asked me questions. Show me the evidence. Show me the science that supports that humans evolved from ape-like ancestors. And I looked and looked, couldn't find it. And so I'm glad he asked me that question, because that completely transformed the way I perceive reality and my respect for the Bible and the God of the Bible, as I told you last night. So here I am, canoeing with my kids back when they were itty-bitty. Time's fun when you're having flies. They were so cute back then. Now they're married and still cute. Anyway, we're on the Buffalo River in Arkansas, and we're looking at all these sedimentary rock layers stacked one on top of the other, no erosion ruts between any of them, and we're putting our hands on the rock so we can see the little crinoid fossils on there. So fossils, yes, means rapid, and then no erosions means no time in between. Well, let's move to another Earth feature that looks young, and that's half of a lizard. Locked in rock in the western U.S., and there he is, ripped in half, stuck in shale. And so these scientists, publishing in 2011, this is the image from their technical publication, they zoomed in on that little square that you see on the left, and they said to themselves, why is the dark part dark? What makes the lizard look dark? And so they wanted to test the material to see if they could answer that question. And sure enough, if you could, then they zoomed in on the white box, and they looked at those little dark circles. Now I could use this thing, but I don't think it's, anyway, here's the white box. I'm going to put the little actual pointer on a dark circle. Do you see the pointer? That's a lizard scale. That's the scale. So skin scales. So they said to themselves, well, modern lizards have skin scales too, and they have little patches of keratin. Keratin, that's it's the stuff that makes your fingernails. But in lizard scales, it's wrapped with skin. So anyway, they found keratin in there, and they said, well, what happened was sediments must have come in and locked on to the keratin, holding it in place over the last 40 million years. And to which I responded in a technical article that I described this in. I said, if water carries in your minerals, then water is going to, of course, catalyze the reaction that will degrade the keratin. It shouldn't have any keratin in there if you've got water. And water is everywhere. There is no such thing as a hermetic rock. So water should have done chemistry. Didn't do chemistry on this. And Dr. Clary just showed this one to you already. It's a mosasaur found in the middle of Kansas because that's where the ocean is. Oh, no, wait. That's where the ocean was. And so it was there recently, I think, there only thousands of years ago, and that's why we have a heart still in this mosasaur, and they found hemoglobin in the heart. So we can boil this down to a question. If animals fossilized millions of years ago, then why do they have short-lived proteins and even whole tissues like these hematopoietic bone marrow in this little frog, supposedly 10 million years old from Spain, but it's still colored red, and it's labeled H in the top right corner. Anyway, we've got dozens and dozens, actually 120 different publications from mainstream scientists who are detailing all these proteins, like these from T-Rex that you just saw a minute ago, with connective tissue made of collagen sequence even, and then we have DNA in some of these dinosaur bones and chondrocytes. And then we have DNA from amber, and we have tissues that are locked in amber. Did you know that amber is not a magical time machine? Amber itself turns dark, develops cracks over time. It's not tree sap, it's tree resin, and it's often associated with coal seams. And in some cases, so how do you get amber, associated with coal seams? Well, a coal seam, what's that? A bunch of plant material that got slathered across a large area, and all this amber is with it. So to get amber, you have to break off a tree so that it gets wounded, and then it spits out its immune system. This material gets deposited with the rocks. That's very flood-like to me, but we can ask the next question. If the Earth lasted millions of years, then why do we find radiocarbon, which lasts even shorter of a time than do proteins? Carbon-14, and it's in diamonds of all places. So diamonds and coal, the ICR Rate project, if you remember that one, fantastic project where we got some original coal samples, we got some original diamonds, and we spent people's donated monies to buy these things and crush those diamonds and put them through, for the first time ever, the radiocarbon dating laboratory. And they found radiocarbon trace amounts, but they found it in there. And if billions of years, if it's even only 100,000 years old, it should have no radiocarbon left. That's the shelf life for it. But we found it in. And so the guys who worked in the lab, they got their own diamonds, and they re-ran their own samples, and they found radiocarbon in their diamonds also. And they published it in 2007 after we published ours. They claimed that it was contamination, but they used circular reasoning to claim that. In other words, and here's what they said in their paper by Taylor, the late Irv Taylor. He said, the reason we have radiocarbon here is because it has to come from contamination. The reason we know it came from contamination is because these diamonds are billions of years old. Because they're billions of years old, they can't have any original radiocarbon in them. Therefore, we know that the radiocarbon that we're detecting has to be contamination. It's totally circular. But we're just looking at the data and asking people the question, well, if it's in diamonds and coal and oil and even fossils, then isn't it reasonable now to conclude that maybe all these carbon-containing earth materials are only thousands, not millions of years old? They look young. Why do we even have continents? Mainstream scientists, geologists, published their a worldwide erosion rate paper, and at the measured erosion rate, we should have no continents after 40 million theoretical years. and yet we've got continents after billions of years. So that takes into account plate tectonics and orogeny and erosion rates are all taken into account in their paper. You can read about that more at ICR.org. But you can ask your friends, why do we even have continents if the Earth is, we should live on a water world? But we don't. Why don't we? It looks like continents look young, okay? Now we're going to go to outer space, our third realm. I think I said 4 realms, but I think I'll modify that to 3 because you guys look like you have the post-lunch drag. And I feel it too. I'm with you. So recent creation of the solar system. We'll go here. Ooh, Comet Hartley 2, favorite comet. Do you see those jets spitting out the one end of it? It's a barbell-shaped rock flinging around in space. Comets, short-period comets, they go way out in space, the solar system, and then they come really close to the sun. So they have these long elliptical orbits. And so at the rate that they're traveling through the solar system, they get so close to the sun so often that the sun should burn them up within just a handful of passes. You shouldn't have any short-period comets, but they're still flinging through the solar system by the thousands. So that's one problem. But then now Comet Hartley 2 has a second young-looking feature. Number one, it's out there. It shouldn't be. And number 2, it's got these jets, so it's spitting material into space. So what's fueling the jets? And what's the material itself? And why is there any of that material still left inside this comet if it's billions of years old? It should have spat it all into space, and it should have burned up every time it passes the sun. But it's still out there causing problems for those who try to fit these observations into an old world view. So we can ask the question, if the solar system is billions of years old, why do we even have short-period comets? Learn more about that at our website or our books and materials. Saturn. Love Saturn. Pretty. Shiny, too. Real shiny and nice. It's so shiny, these rings, that even secular astronomers admit that they're much younger than the rest of the planet. In other words, over time, space dust sticks to ice, and the ice should get duller and duller, and over a million years, just a million, you should have dark, dingy ice rings. But it's bright and shiny as though it was recently created. And so we can ask the question, why are these so shiny? Why aren't they dirty after billions of years? And then what about the heat? So Saturn still emits more heat than it takes in from the sun, or heat that it generates by what we call tidal flexing, where it sort of gets squeezed and smushed every time it orbits the sun. So we can calculate and estimate how much heat is generated by tidal flexing, and the heat that it puts out into space is still much. It's like a hot potato, you know? And if I hand you a hot potato, I toss it to you, you catch it, you're like, hot, hot. But if I toss it around the room, eventually, after millions of years, we get to the back row, and would it be a hot potato anymore? Cold potato. But in this case, we still got a hot potato out in space. And so how is it still hot? The Saturn's moon Enceladus has the same problem. It's shooting jets of material into space. Where's the fuel for that? And it's emitting much more heat than it receives, Enceladus. And now the fourth realm, we'll blast through this as we travel ever larger. Recent creation of the universe, we can ask our friends these questions. Beautiful spiral galaxies that should have wound up and lost all their spiral structure if they're as old as secular astronomers claim that they are. Billions and billions of years old. They should have, you see the inside, so this will be a spiral arm with stars all along the arm. This will be another spiral arm. And then what happens is, and there's stars at the center of the core of the galaxy in the middle, and then over time the center spins faster than the out edges of the arms, so they wind up, and one arm bleeds into the next arm, and then it should blur into a disc-shaped galaxy, but they're not discs; they're still spiral-shaped, and so this presents a conundrum. They've got a rescuing device to rescue the billions of years view from the evidence itself, and that is spiral density waves. But the problem with that, in other words, there's these density areas where the stars clump up and then they slide out slowly, and then they clump up again and they slide out slowly in between the spaces between the arms. But you know what that does? It only adds another question. Where do the density waves come from? And why do they look young? And so by trying to rescue, they actually add more problems than they solve. And this is the case with most of these issues that we're looking at today. And so when it comes to a conversation with somebody, you say, what about spiral galaxies? Don't they look young? And then they'll say spiral density waves. And then you just keep asking questions. Well, where did that come from? Well, where did that come from? And just keep pestering your buddy with questions because you know, it's the people who love us that pester us the most. If spiral galaxies are billions of years old, why aren't they disks? I'm just asking a question. And where's the missing supernova remnants? If the universe is billions of years old, stars should have been exploding for all that time. And these remnants, they look like dust clouds that shine, shiny dust clouds out there. You should have maybe as many of these as you have stars, something like that. But they're very rare, actually, supernova remnants. And this fits with the idea that of recent creation, where stars were made only thousands of years ago. Ooh, so do the blue stars. The blue stars burn through their energy, burn through their fuel very fast. They're the SUVs of the star world, the blue stars. And they're scattered all over space. Some are in the galactic cores, but some are just floating out there in space. Some are in the spiral arms of spiral galaxies and elliptical galaxies. Blue stars here, blue stars there, blue stars everywhere. And so the question is, where do you get all these blue stars? Because at the rate at which they burn through their fuel, some of these blue stars could only last a maximum shelf life of 1 million years. And yet they're supposed to be billions of years old. You know what we need? We need a rescuing device. Let's rescue them by having star nurseries. That's where they came from, star nurseries that generate new blue stars. And so astronomers routinely talk about star nurseries where stars are forming. But did you know that no one has ever seen a star blink on? And so I think star nurseries like Oort clouds and some other of these names, they don't have any basis in observational science. So anyway, there's one good way to explain them. And that is recent creation. Why are there so many blue stars that are still burning through so much fuel so fast? Because God made them and put them in the sky recently. You know, he claims exclusive credit for doing that. He said, I put the stars in the sky. He says it throughout the scriptures. And I think it does a Christian good to give God credit for what he's claiming to do. You know, he did this thing called resurrection. He raised his own son from the dead so that would be our, I guess, guarantee, our receipt for the transaction where we give him our sinful lives, and in exchange, he gives us everlasting life for free. That's the exchange. What's the guarantee that can happen, that will happen when we die? Resurrection. So resurrection means miracles are possible, and miracles happened. And the way you get a universe like ours is through miracle. So we have natural processes don't explain what we see, and that leaves us with supernatural processes that fit exactly what Genesis chapter 1 tells us. So I have a lot of confidence in Genesis 1, that God got it right. He deserves the credit. And so that's what I'd like to see other people think about. So I would ask them questions like this. After billions of years, shouldn't short-lived blue stars have gone extinct? Then they'll say star nurseries. And then I can say, if there's star nurseries, then can you give me an example of a star that's blinked on? You know, and just let them think about that for a minute. So there, take that. Well, we've gone through 4 realms. I don't have the right pictures on my slides for the books that we have left here, so I'm just going to hold them up. So this is the one, Why the World Looks So Young. It's a booklet, so even I can read it. Look how thin that is. Yeah, and it costs less than a cup of coffee, and it's way more impactful. So Why the World Looks So Young. I even have one called Dinosaurs in the Bible, and I got to say, I had a lady come up to me after a talk a couple years ago, and she found this at like a truck stop. We've sold tens of thousands of these, and they're great. And I think they're great because, I guess I'm biased. But she said, I got this at a truck stop, read it, And she said, it totally transformed the way I think about everything. She said, I believe the Bible now. Can I get a picture with you? I'm like, of course. So she was so ecstatic. And then we're out of Creation Basics and beyond, but we do have plenty of copies of Creation Basics, which we published first. And I think this is a fantastic gift. If you don't like pictures, there's someone in your life who does. And in fact, if you want more information in a fun and friendly way about what I just presented, it goes into soft tissue, it goes into spiral galaxies, it goes into some of the things I presented today in all the 4 realms, and there's a lot more in Creation Basics. So those are my 3 resources. Because this session right now is all about getting you equipped so you can do what we're trying to train you up to do. Because I'm just a guy, one guy. Dr. Galuza is just one guy. We need to multiply ourselves to become Christians who believe and even defend our own book. So that's what we're on about. Believe it and defend it. And it's not that hard to defend because there's so much great science that backs it up. And so get equipped. And so if you want to get these 3, if you get these 3 today, they will come during this conference with free cellophane wrapping. Thanks.